In this section, we're going to talk about NAPALM and Ansible. So first of all, what is NAPALM? NAPALM is a Python library that provides a uniform interface for a set of networking platforms. And in NAPALM, there's generally two categories of operations. The first set of operations are getter operations. And in those getter operations, you're going to call some get method that's going to go and query the devices in some way. So the way could be SSH for Cisco IOS, or it could be NX API for NXOS, or it could be Arista's eAPI or Juniper's netconf in those specific cases. So you'll call this getter method, and behind the scenes, some transport will be used to go and query the device for that information. And then the key point is you're going to be returned a standardized data structure for that getter operation. So regardless of the underlying transport, regardless of whether it's NX API or eAPI or netconf or straight SSH, you're going to get a standardized data structure back. Similarly, for the config operations, there's a uniform interface for the config operations. You use this uniform interface, and then behind the scenes, NAPALM goes and performs the config operations, and it tries to create an ACID-like mechanism for doing the config operations. So it's trying to replicate what we have in Juniper with this candidate config, commit the config, give me the differences, roll back the config, and tries to provide that across a set of platforms. Now, what vendors do we have with NAPALM? So there's really 5 core vendors, and these are going to be Arista EOS, Cisco IOS, IOS XR, NXOS, and Juniper Junos. And then there's some community NAPALM drivers, so Fortinet, MikroTik, Palo Alto, Pluribus, and Viata for the community provided drivers. Now, what NAPALM Ansible modules do we have? We have a NAPALM ping for executing a ping from the device. We have a NAPALM get fax for retrieving various getter information, including facts about the device itself. We have a NAPALM validate module that goes and verifies certain information given an external definitions file, and you'll see that more when we dive into it. And then we have a way of doing some configuration operations using this NAPALM install config. Now there's a bunch of NAPALM getters. I show some of them here, and there's a big matrix in the NAPALM documentation showing you which getters are supported on which platform, and I'll show that to you here. So here there's this big table in the NAPALM documentation underneath the supported devices where you have all the various getters and which platforms support the various getters. And then similarly for the config operations, now these are the Python methods that you call. This will be abstracted away from you in Ansible, but you get a sense of what you're capable of doing for config. So there's a merge config, which is basically dealing with a part of a configuration. There's a replace config operation where replace is doing an entire configuration replacement. So here is the old config, and here is the new configuration that it's going to be entirely replaced with. There's a compare configuration operation for giving me a diff between the candidate config and the running config. There's a discard configuration operation. There's a commit operation, and there's a rollback. And these should work reasonably well for the 5 core platforms. For the community provided platforms, I don't have as much context on how well they work, but for the core platform, these config operations should work reasonably well. So This provides a high-level overview of NAPALM. It's a Python library. It's trying to provide a uniform programming interface that you can connect into that hides away the mechanics of the underlying API. There's two main categories of operations. There's these getter operations and there's these configuration operations. And then in the context of NAPALM Ansible, there's a set of modules that we have available to us. This NAPALM ping, NAPALM get facts, NAPALM validate, NAPALM install config. There's quite a bit of work going on with NAPALM Yang, but I'm not really going to talk about that much in this course. That's something that's going on for future development that'll be somewhere down the road.